You're listening to a podcast of Master Your Finances with me, Kurt Baker, a certified financial planner professional. Sunday mornings at 9 a.m. on 1077thebronx.com.
Another day, another dollar, and our certified financial planner professional, Kurt Baker, will give you the tips you need to turn that single into a sea of green with Master Your Finances. Whether you have enough to get by or too much in your pockets, Kurt Baker and his weekly guests are here to show you how to manage it all. Master Your Finances is underwritten by Certified Wealth Management and Investment LLC. Now listen up, because it's time to get a hold of those money matters and master your finances.
Good morning and welcome back to another edition of Master Your Finances, presented by Certified Wealth Management and Investment. I am Kurt Baker, a certified financial planner professional located in Princeton, New Jersey. I can be reached at our website, which is www.cwmi.us, or you can call me directly at 609-716-4700. And I am here and very pleased to have with me Annette Murphy, who is the Director of Home Care and Care Management for Spring Point Home at Home, which is a nonprofit private duty home care firm. Annette is the Director of Spring Point at Home's nonprofit private duty home care and care management agency based in central New Jersey. The agency's mission is to inspire our family with endless opportunities. Annette has over 20 years of experience in a variety of geriatric health care settings. She's worked as a licensed social work geriatric care manager in hospitals, rehabilitation centers, nursing homes, and lastly in home-based care. All of her experience enabled her to become a certified as an advanced aging life care advisor. She has also served as an adjunct professor in the psychology department at the College of New Jersey, and is a member of the National Association of Social Workers, a board member of the New Jersey Aging Life Care Association, and a member of Mercer Geriatric Advisory Council, a Rotarian, avid community volunteer. She serves on the Spring Point Ethics Committee and Professional Services Committee. She holds her master's in social work from Rutgers University and bachelor's in family studies at gerontology from Messiah College. And her main passion is educating clients and caregivers about creative solutions to healthcare and aging challenges. And this is kind of near and dear to me as a financial planner. I say this many times. I think a lot of us in my industry on the financial side, we're saving up money and trying to prepare for retirement, and all these things are going to happen. But I don't think people in general, including my professional, I'm going to criticize it for a minute, we don't really kind of know enough about what is happening and what we're actually using the funds for and how it actually is implemented and laid out. I mean, we tend to know basics about we need the money, we need to get it ready for it. But I think it's important when people are transitioning to this part of their life that they understand the options and you understand what it means, not just from a financial standpoint, but also from a personal standpoint, because it's a very big change in life when you get a little bit older and start having to make some of these adjustments. So you have a lot of designations in social work and also psychology. I thought that was kind of interesting because to me that kind of goes together. I think that's great. So how did you kind of get motivated to go into this area of practice?
I have always had a passion and interest in working with older adults, and I think partly from my own upbringing. I grew up in a small rural community in Pennsylvania where there was a great sense of community helping each other and everyone relying on each other's strengths to support one another. And I grew up in a household where we had this open door policy, always baking goods and helping someone who's ill. One of my favorite memories is sitting in the back of church at the end of service and sitting with someone that I called my other grandma, who was legally blind and sat in the back with her little dog, and I'd go visit with her, and we would exchange little tokens and gifts. So there's always been this extended family of elders around me that I really adored and respected. My grandparents grew up next door. My other grandparents were 20 minutes away, and they were all very, very involved in our lives. So,
well, that sounds very old school, because isn't that the way things used to work? Is you literally sometimes live in one house, or you'd be right on the same farm, and everybody be together.
We were on the same farm, yeah.
And your grandparents were living in the room down the hall or whatever, and everybody was kind of together. Unfortunately, we kind of gotten away from that because we're such a mobile society.
Exactly.
But as we get older, those connections can be very important. To support each other, right?
Yes.
So ultimately, it sounds like you went into social work.
Yes.
And now you're here. So what got you interested in Spring Point, and what are you guys doing over there?
Well, at this, at that juncture, I started in healthcare because when I came to New Jersey, I came to go to Rutgers for my master's degree, and I worked in a hospital. And I saw how in the healthcare system, families were in conflict. They were in crisis. They lived across the country. And what I grew up with and my experience of living on the same street where everyone really networked and you figured things out in a more informal way just didn't exist. So over the years of working in healthcare, my passion really grew and grew for trying to find a way to not just be the social worker who worked in the rehab and my boundaries were there, and more of my role was meeting regulations for that particular facility. So when I had an opportunity to work for a small geriatric firm in Pennington, who also had their own private duty home care, originally they approached me and I wasn't quite ready for that flexibility in my life, but years later they approached me again and I said, absolutely yes. That was one of the best decisions I made because they were getting ready to retire and sell the business. So part of my being hired there was to learn more of the management and how to make things work for the care management piece of the business. And then they sold us to Spring Point. So they told me, they couldn't tell me who they were selling to, but they told me, Annette, you will be very proud to work for them. It's a great organization. You'll be in great hands. And they couldn't have been more correct about that merger. So Spring Point at Home, we've been with them now. It'll be 5 years this year that I am with them. And the previous director left 2 years ago to further her degree in nursing, and I took over as the director of the agency. So it's exciting because there's so many opportunities for really helping our seniors and working with trusted advisors like yourself in education, knowing what their options are, as well as providing the direct services. So it's exciting for me to be able to build our talented team and also do things like this where I'm educating folks about what we do.
No, I think it's very important. I think it's a growth area in general. I mean, I'm noticing, at least in New Jersey, they seem to be building more and more facilities, it seems like. So, I guess, what does this involve, so to speak, as far as care management goes? I mean, sometimes we throw the terms around a little bit, but
Yes.
I mean, what does it actually mean, I guess,
Yes.
is what I'm trying to get to, in kind of the layman's terms. What do you guys do, and how does that benefit the families? And I know that when people are spread across the country, that really becomes a really big problem sometimes, because sometimes you'll have the one that really can help. They don't necessarily live here. They might live in California, the one that might have more of the personality connection to the person who needs help. So sometimes that's very important to understand what somebody wants as far as their personal preferences, and they may or may not necessarily be the financial person. So we often talk about the one that kind of aligns with your medical needs or your personal needs, things you like to do and want to do, and then you kind of have who's the person that's better to handle the kind of the financial end, and they're not necessarily the same person. They could be. So how do you find that all kind of works when they're spread out a little bit, and how do you manage all that?
Oh, that's a very good question. That's probably one of the number one referrals we get is because families are at a distance. They're really passionate and involved in their loved ones' lives. They care tremendously, but they just can't be, as we often say, we're the boots on the ground. We are the first responders for their loved ones. So we don't take over the role of the other family members, and we instead are an augmentation. We're sort of that surrogate professional family member who works with all of the various support team that works with the client, whether it's professional support team or their family support team, and we come up with a comprehensive care plan with them. So care manager, I will back up a moment to that. The care manager term, I use it interchangeably because aging life care advisor is really that professional level. We used to be called the Geriatric Care Management Association, but care manager in the layperson's term can often mean the insurance person who's trying to reduce care and utilization and making sure you get out of the hospital on time. Or a care manager can refer to, even in some places, the aide who's taking care of someone in a facility, or the scheduler at a home care agency. So for me, I'm passionate about also making sure that that association of the Aging Life Care Association, that term, that people get to know that trademark term, because that means you've got someone who has a master's degree, who is typically either a nurse or a social worker, who then has years of experience working in healthcare and in geriatrics. So you've got all of that as their basis. And then within the organization, there are different levels of membership. So for myself, being an advanced level professional in the group, that means I work very specifically in this concierge care management geriatric field for at least 5 years or more full time. So we are at Spring Point at Home, we are a corporate sponsor for the organization, as well as this coming year I'll be one of the co-presidents for the state organization. So it is a really good organization to be a part of for Spring Point at Home because it builds awareness of the level of professionalism that we bring to what we're doing, as well as the fact that it brings additional training and guidelines for my team and my staff. And the other piece is that for folks, if they call Spring Point at Home or they go on my website and they meet the team, they see the bios for my team, but they say, you know what, my loved one goes to Florida, or I've got another relative and they're just outside of your area you serve. There's no fear that they're just going to call my agency and I'll say, well, sorry, I just can't do that. That's not how I operate, and that's a good thing of how we have the organization, is because when they call, I have on our association a listing of other professionals, and many of them now, because of my involvement on the national level of going to the conferences and being involved, I know them personally. Mm-hmm. So just last week I took a call from another professional, a pharmacist, who needed some help with this really unusual situation that was taking place now in Florida. And I was able to say, you know what, I don't want you to repeat this story again because it's really emotional to have to go through the angst of explaining this. So if it's okay with you, I'm going to call a colleague who's in that area and see if she can take this on, if that's in her wheelhouse, and then we'll get back to you by the end of today. And that was wonderful because he called me back later that day. He'd connected with her. A week later, he called back and said, yeah, she's working on it. She's gone out, and all the things that were taking place. So it's a really wonderful feeling to know that you're not leaving anybody hanging. And it's both for aging life care, but also for our home care side. I like to collaborate and work with what others would perceive as our competition, because if I don't have an aide who fits their needs or isn't available in that area at that time, I want to know that they don't have to be lost, because it's frustrating being a family member calling 5 different places, even if you know what you think you're looking for, to just have to repeat your story. That's exhausting in and of itself. So I like to be able to hand off to someone else and work with them.
I agree with 100%, because I feel the same way when people contact me. It's like they want an answer, and if you can't provide it directly, it's great when you have that expertise and those relationships, which are really important, because you've been around a little while, and that's great, because now you know these people, you know their competency, you know their skill set, and you know on a personality level, are they going to match up? So that's fantastic. You're listening to Master Your Finances. We'll be right back. Welcome back. You're listening to Master Your Finances. I'm Kurt Baker here with Annette Murphy, and we've been talking about what a care manager is, and you're very involved in the Aging Life Care Association, right? Which is really just kind of another level of understanding what people's expertise is, and I think that's great because, I know like in our industry, you don't necessarily know what people are doing. It's kind of like a lawyer, right? Lawyers can do all kinds of things. It's just, but is my lawyer an expert in my area? So this kind of helps you to understand what their experience level is and things that they've done, right? Is that my understanding?
Yes.
And so how many people are have this level of expertise out there? Can you give a kind of a sense of that if you're looking around?
So it's a national organization, but in the state of New Jersey, there are about 100 members in the state of New Jersey. So it's a highly specialized field within what most social workers and care managers do.
Right, because I know there's a lot of social workers out, but not everybody necessarily engages in this particular area of expertise, right?
No, and part of our marketing efforts this year have been going to the National Conference for Social Workers and trying to educate them even about this career path. Right,
because you have different levels of expertise, and you have training, and you have things like that, right? So they meet different levels, which is important. So it's good from a consumer standpoint. You know what their background is, and yes, they're trained in this particular area. So it just gives you a little bit more confidence that you're more likely to get somebody that's going to be able to help you out.
Exactly, and that's exactly why at Spring Point at Home, we're part of a corporate sponsorship with them, because we know that it gives our consumers that peace of mind that everyone's been trained and vetted and have that expertise.
Well, it's good when your corporate entity takes training seriously.
Yes.
I think that's a very good thing because we all want somebody that's helping us to be trained.
Yes.
So there's a number. So how do you guys like assess and like figure out what we're going to do and how we're going to do this? So can you kind of take us through that little process?
Certainly. Now, it's a little bit of a dance because...
We're going to learn how to dance?
Yeah, well, I think so.
Is it the rumba? What are we going to learn? What dance are we going to learn here?
Depends on which one you want to learn.
Okay.
How serious or how fun it is.
All right.
But I say a dance because there's no one cookie cutter to how a client is approached. So from the moment we have a conversation with the person calling with the concern, whether it's their financial advisor, their attorney, or a loved one that calls in first, it's trying to figure out from their perspective, what are the challenges, what's been tried before, and what is their perception of why they're reaching out for help. So I say it's a dance because there are 8 main expert areas that we are evaluating for when we see every client. But I often tease that the majority of clients call us for 1 or maybe 2 areas of crisis, something that gave them that extra itch or irritation at the moment to finally pick up the phone and call or to seek out your expertise and make that connection. But generally for us as the expert evaluator, it's a multi-step process for coming up with our care plan. And we're always looking at all these areas and then coming down to sort of a negotiation at the end of the top 3 things we're going to tackle. So it always has the thing that they called you for that's pressing on their mind. But my experience is there's often other things they may not have considered. So it's part of our expertise is bringing that into the picture. So I'll give you an example of the 8. One of the graphics that we often use, and you'll see on our website for Spring Point at Home as well as Aging Life Care Association, is a wheel. The care manager, and the guys usually like this analogy of saying we're the general contractor, or one of the attorneys that I work with, we did a presentation together once, and she literally had me put a football helmet and a jersey on and said I was the quarterback, because that is another great term to say we're the quarterback of all these different services. So in the middle of that, we're looking at crisis planning, looking at that person saying, okay, if tomorrow a crisis happened, do you have things lined up, or who is it that are your go-to people? And everything as simple as going into the house and making sure an emergency EMT document is on the fridge so that when they come and look, they know who they're supposed to be calling and where their documents are. We're looking at the legal aspect because many folks are coming to us in a crisis, but they maybe don't always understand why they need not just any lawyer, but a lawyer that has expertise in their unique situation, not just always even an elder care lawyer, but maybe an elder care lawyer who can do trusts, an elder care lawyer who can do the Medicaid because they're already at that point, or an elder care lawyer because they just simply need the power of attorneys and their will and HIPAA documents all done. So sometimes they think that the crisis is most important, but we as the professional realizes that so many other things can't happen moving down the line if we don't have those in place now. And that they sometimes, for example, just yesterday I had a conversation with someone. They said, well, it's my spouse. Of course I don't need to have power of attorney for them. And I thought, that's well, see, I see the look on your face. You know that that's not good. But honestly, how many people would think that if it's my spouse, why would I need that? And they're not thinking as I can see from the look on your face, you have the experience of, right. Or dealing with dementia. Exactly. And many times we're dealing with memory loss, and part of our role is also trying to prevent costly guardianship and trying to get things in order now so that it's preventing even more of a crisis later on. So that's, legal's another piece we're looking at. We're looking at the advocacy piece. Sometimes people come to us because that person is vulnerable and they've been taken advantage of. And, perhaps they've even called Adult Protective Services or other entities to get help, but that person willingly took someone to the ATM and took money out because they just were lonely and wanted a friend. So there were no legal repercussions because they willingly did it. That's one example I had with a client. There's many others of that when they're lonely and someone maybe even well-intentioned crosses some boundaries. with that person, and they just start giving them things, and that person maybe doesn't even want it, but they start doing that. So advocacy in that regard is another big piece of what we do, of trying to untangle some of those relationships that don't have boundaries like someone who's a trained professional would with those individuals. Another area we always look at is their family network. And I use the air quotes around family because there are individuals who maybe don't have family, or they do, but they haven't seen them or talked to them or let them in their houses for years. So I have had training with the Hoarding Institute as well, and have worked with clients where other traditional professional methods haven't kind of broken through because of the hoarding situation that they've had at home. They then become afraid to let anyone, even their family members, in to see. They're afraid to seek out other help. And typically they only come to us when it is a dire crisis. And say, for example, one of the last cases I had recently was a loved one was separated from the person that was their emotional go-to, so to say. It was an adult child who'd never been really out of the house and with anyone other than mom. And now she was in a rehab and then put into a nursing home, and the emotional anxiety that caused. But it wasn't a safe discharge. So how could they discharge mom to a place where there wasn't a safe bed or running water and other things that were needed? So that's when we work with our expert teams of folks who do the decluttering and the deep cleaning and the pest control and repairs. And it takes a lot of work, but we're the ones overseeing and being that emotional support too, with part of, at least for my team, we're all social work background, that expertise of bonding and working and building rapport with that person. That case, it took me over 6 months to build rapport with the person in the home. And finally, baby steps of let me walk on the porch, let me step inside the door, and realize I'm not judging you. I want to support you because I see that for your loved one's quality of life and yours, that the only way to do this is to try to unify you again.
Right.
So it takes more than just cleaning out a house. It's the support afterwards so that it maintains that quality of life and lifestyle. Everything from having a meal delivery service that maybe isn't your cookie cutter Meals on Wheels that people don't want, maybe because they have higher expectations or they have more means to pay for a gourmet meal delivered to their door. A house cleaning service, the laundry service, an LPN or aide that's going to be there to do the personal care. So it's sort of like creating a little village of other support people within that home to make it happen and maintain it. And those are the stories, and those are the times that's like, it's the magic, that it's exhausting to do it, but on this end of it, now it's successful for a few years later, it's the thing that you will always, at least for me in this profession, always remember and say, that's the hard stuff, that you dig in a little bit deeper, you do the things that are a little more unconventional, and you make it work.
Right, right. Because it is personal. Now, you mentioned you had the 8 items, but you said there were 1 or 2 that are most typical that people contact you for. So what are the top? I could guess, but I'm going to let you say it.
So the top two are healthcare and a crisis. So it's a crisis.
Crisis is the one I was going to say.
Crisis is inevitably the case, however you brand it, but it's typically moms or dads in the ER, or I had one. They both the husband and wife had dementia, and the police had been out multiple times, and suddenly everybody realized how bad things were in the house. The water wasn't running. There were some electrical problems, the wandering that the police has and it was a crisis right this moment. As in, Annette, you need to get in your car and drive to the house today because we have to sort this out. And that's where, in that case, since I was actually leaving town that day, having someone else who was a trusted care partner in this organization, I was able to pick up the phone and call another aging life care professional and said, are you able to tackle this today? And they were able to. So yes, number 1 is generally a crisis that's unfolding at this very instant, and can you handle it? Number 2 is a crisis that's in the works. It's the person where they just came home to visit at Thanksgiving or Christmas with mom and dad. They haven't seen them for a while, and they call, let's say, one of the lawyers I works with who does guardianship, they called this lawyer and said, oh no, I think things are worse than I ever thought. I didn't imagine from when I was on the phone how things were going, and I think I need to get guardianship or get some control because mom and dad aren't listening to me. Mm-hmm. So then that attorney calls me and says, can you go out to the house and at least see if this is really guardianship, just do an assessment? And I've had everything from I go and realize that maybe there's some other family dynamics and that's not really the case. Two, maybe it's just the dynamic between the kids is their language is now out of frustration saying you should, you must, and the parents don't want to listen. So having someone like myself in the middle kind of provides a buffer, and we can make some changes, but they're not really a crisis. It's just frustration.
No, that's good to hear because, I mean, I want to talk a little bit more about this, but we're going to pick it up right after the break because I think there's some things that you can do in the moment and maybe some things that if we think ahead of time, that maybe we can avoid this from potentially happening. You're listening to Master Your Finances, and we'll be right back. Welcome back. You're listening to Master Your Finance. I'm Kurt Baker here with Annette Murphy, and we were kind of going through the 8 areas that you kind of assess for, and I think the ones that we were just talking about is some of the 2 top ones were healthcare and crisis, and crisis was the one I was going to kind of guess because unfortunately, when they don't plan ahead, you end up with a crisis situation. Unfortunately, that's not typically what happens with my clients, thank goodness, but that's what we're in the business for, is to try to plan ahead. So if you don't mind kind of walking through, if you have examples of the difference between somebody who's not planning ahead and not ready for these types of things that are inevitably going to happen to most of us, and somebody who's actually thought about it ahead of time and maybe has everybody kind of on the same page on what we're going to do if these things happen. So I don't know if you could kind of tell us how that might look in each scenario.
Definitely. So, one of the things people will ask me is, when do you refer to you? They might say, oh, this is a great service, but when do I know? I say, well, to have those conversations with an aging life care advisor doesn't mean there's the crisis. It's best in the beginning, and just do a consultation where we do a basic assessment, just like you would if you're going to your financial planner, you're going to your attorney. Just look at the big picture and have those conversations. So the difference would be the person, and I'll give you an example of a client where they came to us, the family said, we live in New York, California, mom's here, she's by herself, she's doing great. But she's, in her late 80s, and we're just thinking of what are the next steps. And they were thinking, what if there is a crisis? Who's going to be the one that goes to the hospital? Who's going to be the one to make sure that things in the house are set up safely for a safe discharge, and make choices of where she can go if she can't stay in her home? So they had called us in. We did an overall evaluation, and then we were available as needed, but we'd just touch base every month to see if there were any changes in her medication, any changes in her plans, just staying in touch overall. And every visit we make, it's completely transparent. Whoever the trusted advisors are with that person, each visit we send a little email out to, and for some people it's their lawyer, their neighbor, it's their friend. So that's why I often say air quotes around family, because you make up and decide who your supported network is. So they're all aware of our work with that person and that we're there, so that when something then for that client happened, they started to see some cognitive changes. They were a little concerned. So we talked about options for testing. What was she willing to do? What would she like to do? What the family's concerns were, and kept having that conversation, setting up appointments, and getting a determination. So fast forward a little bit later, when there is a crisis where one has to go to the hospital, things accelerate, making the determination with the family of what's the best option for this particular scenario for rehabilitation, then trying to manage for a bit at home and setting up where our private duty home health aides to manage that. And if that was no longer working, talking about the options for the best placement, because we needed, and there's always the plan. As I say, we hope for the best, we plan for the worst. In some ways, you have that A, B, and C plan, that even when someone's really stable and they're not in a crisis, we're in plan A, but we're going to set and plan for B and C, just to knowing that individual, knowing their finances, knowing what they want for housing. It's much harder for that person in a crisis because it's not a one-size-fits-all. And there's no one facility or one home care aid or one magic fix that you just plug somebody into. It really is not that kind of magic.
Right.
So knowing that person and knowing what helps them live their best life, truly, hearing the concerns of their trusted advisors, but knowing that person helps us in that crisis. So I'll give you an example of someone who was more in the crisis and how hard it is to make that decision. So you get a phone call from someone saying, my loved one's in the emergency room and I really need to have someone go. We don't live in the area. Can you go and see them? But you get there and that person's under stress. You don't have the benefit of their full past medical history other than what the hospital has. Things are happening where even if they're alert and oriented, I don't know about you, but if I'm in that situation, I can't think straight.
Oh, no. Stress definitely impairs your mental capability to process information. That is for sure.
Yes. So you factor all that in and then fast forward a bit and this person's admitted and they're asking life and death decisions to be made. And in this particular case, a question about a feeding tube. Now, the individual had done documents with an attorney some time ago saying that they didn't want one, but now that they were faced with it, they were really unsure. They said, well, I don't think I'm dying. I think maybe I could survive with this. Should I have it? What are the risks? And a decision had to be made. And then as the doctors are coming in, they're putting more pressure after day one into day two of this has to be decided now.
Right.
And in that scenario, it's really tough to be witness and try to be their advocate for it because I can't make that decision for that person. Mm-hmm. The family can't fully make that decision if they're still alert and oriented, but it's so stressful. And I think, of another scenario, same kind of thing in the hospital where I knew the person's wishes and had known them for years and we had the document. And when it came to that tough decision, and their spouse and family felt really emotional and wanted to make the choice that they wanted made because they weren't ready to let go, we were able to have a meaningful conversation about, well, this is what your loved one said before. This is what led them to make this document. This is where we're at. It's still their choice. But having those tough conversations, and they decided not to move forward with it and really reflected on the wishes that person had when they were alert and oriented and put it on their document. So all that to say, it's for both the family and as the advisor, it is much different experience, and there's a much more quality conversations to go into, and everyone's a little bit more at peace with the decisions that are made when there's planning. And honestly, even back to the days when I worked in orthopedics and I did the pre-admission class, I have to say unequivocally, from my experience with that, of someone having elective surgery, even the people who planned ahead, I could almost guarantee that when they were discharged, they had more of a sense of control and calm than the people who were like, I'm just going to pretend with my eyes closed and go into this and it's going to come out however my doctor and everybody says it's going to come out.
No, I think education and planning and many things, especially dealing with things as important as this, you always end up with a better result because if you're planning ahead, you have a little more time to think about it, and people do make course adjustments.
Yes.
Over time, and they're like, well, okay, that sounded good, but maybe I want to tweak this a little bit. Maybe that's not where I want to go. I want to go to this particular place instead, or because things happen over time. I like the fact that the ones that are planning, there's kind of this ongoing check-in because situations do change. So, this is the kind of thing I'm very familiar with is you want to always stay in touch with people because things may change on our end as an industry, or things may change on their end as a consumer of whatever it is that's going on.
Right.
Their needs and wants may change a little bit. So you always want to kind of align those up as closely as you can, what's available with what they want.
Right.
And what they can afford and things like that. And then I agree also that I think the biggie is stress, in my opinion, because not knowing, even if you had a similar result, enduring all that stress is not good for the loved one or the family, especially if they're under some type of medical duress, to have that other layer of not knowing what's going to happen. That's not good for their health. No. So, and of course, it's not good for the family's health either because they probably have other things happening in their life as well.
Yes.
So just taking a little, and it doesn't take that much time, right? You just have to sit down and say, hey, we really need to at least start this process. And I think if you start it in kind of a small way, it's a lot easier to kind of go into it and just flow, right? You just got to take those first few steps. And I know when we do our planning and so forth, what we always hear afterwards is how much better they feel knowing those steps.
Yes.
Right? I mean, once it's done, they kind of have a little bit of a sense of relief, like, okay, at least we understand the path.
Yes.
We have a much better feeling about this whole thing.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's the kind of similar situation you might see as well.
It is. And, I'm thinking of another scenario or group, I should say, of clients that call. And those referrals tend to come from trusted advisors like the financial planners and the attorneys. It's the folks that the term now used as elder orphans.
Right.
Many of our clients are those who, if they do have a relative, it may be a distant niece or someone who's the same age as them, but they don't have someone like children or a spouse actively involved. And I find the reason those referrals come to us from their other advisors is because the greatest anxiety and stress for them is that they know that they need to plan. They may be a planning type of person. They've met with their attorney, but they're stuck because they don't know who to appoint as their healthcare proxy.
Oh, right.
And I give talks with the Conversations of Your Life Coalition. I've given other talks for end-of-life planning, and that's the thing that folks who are educated on this and have gone to their attorneys and others, but they're stuck, is because they don't know who to appoint. They either, like I said, they don't have the family, or if they have someone, they say, well, that person has mental illness, or that person is incapacitated, or they go through the reasons of why they can't appoint them. So an aging life care advisor, not all of them, but many of us can be appointed as someone who will be their healthcare proxy.
Oh.
And it's a good partnership with another trusted advisor, so they have someone who's appointed over their finances.
Right.
And there's a balance of power, so to say,
Right.
that you work together in tandem as a team. And with those clients, we tend to set up meetings where I'll say, look, you can sit down and interview myself, you can interview another trust officer, maybe they already have their attorney, and you can interview some others. And you find the folks that you feel click for you, because these are the people that are going to help you moving forward when there is a crisis.
Excellent. Excellent suggestion. I think it's a great idea. You're listening to Master Your Finances. We'll be right back. Welcome back. You're listening to Master Your Finances. I am Kurt Baker here with Annette Murphy. And we're talking about having an aging life care advisor and like what that means and the pros and cons. As a planner, I'm big on planning ahead. And as you mentioned in our last segment, how it significantly lowers the stress level. And then you get better results because you have a little bit of time to decide what you want to do. It's probably much more cost effective and a lot of stress on the individual as well as the family. But we do have to take those first steps. And I think sometimes people just don't understand what this is. So how does that process work, and what type of clients you have, and how much does this cost, right? So people are start talking about, well, how do I do all this? And because that tends to be one of the barriers, right? This costs money sometimes, and so how do we manage all that, and how do we incorporate that into what we're trying to do?
Right. Yeah. So that is probably the big question when people get what we do. They say, oh, that's great, but then what's the cost? So the average cost, at least in New Jersey, is anywhere from $130 an hour upwards to close to $200 an hour. There's quite a range. It is billed hourly. Some agencies have retainer fees and set contracts. We don't. So with Spring Point at Home, it's pretty straightforward and simple. They use as little or as much as they need, because our goal is to have people do that planning before they're in crisis. And a way of doing that is not setting up other barriers where they have to put up a huge retainer or they have to sign a complicated contract. It is simply them paying for us, it's $135 an hour. So they pay that for the assessment, and it takes us more than an hour to do an intake assessment, but we do that because, again, I want them to start that planning and start that conversation before it is too much of a problem. So part of that assessment starts with that phone conversation. There may be some surveys that we send out to family members or other loved ones to get their input. Then we set up a home assessment. So we want to see the home environment that they're in already and see what the challenges might be. And if we see certain red flags, we'll bring in another free evaluation from a home occupational therapist or someone like that to really say, okay, we saw some red flags about aging in place or safety issues, looking at the big picture. So we're looking at the housing, we're talking about finances, what can you really afford? Because many people say, well, I want to stay in this house, but we need to then know the other pieces of the puzzle. Can you stay here? Is it financially feasible? Do you have the support and so forth? So the cost, again, it's just that one assessment. And I've had folks come to us. We do that assessment. We write a report. We give them all our recommendations, the resources, and then we don't hear from them. And they wait till that crisis 3 years later, and then I hear from them. That's the worst case scenario. The best case scenario is the one where we do that assessment. They then say, aha, look at all these things we hadn't considered. Look at these different resources. And we have a partnership in the sense that the family says, okay, well, these things we want to do. We can do those, but can you do X, Y, and Z for us? Or they say, these are all great. Can you run with this and move forward to the next plan? Other folks, it's just a plan. There's nothing else really going on. We just say, okay, we're going to be PRN or as needed, meaning we make that monthly phone call and check in with you. We have the assessment. We know what your medical situation, housing, legal, all of those pieces.
Right.
And then we're here waiting in the wings. But then because we have that ongoing relationship with them every month and they're trusted folks, if something is off or something doesn't seem right, they know to call us. And we also are touching base. And we try to get into the house again, although for some people, the finances, they don't necessarily always want another hourly visit each month. But there's so many things you can see when you go see someone in their house that you will never know when you talk to mom or dad or even your client on the phone.
And this sounds like somebody that has their loved ones are far away, so they don't really have anybody necessarily checking in with them physically. Is that kind of what you're thinking, or does it?
Sometimes not always.
Just in addition.
In addition,
okay.
Because you find that with family members, there's other resistance that's built.
Oh, sure.
So,
Different opinions, too.
Different opinions. So if someone already thinks you're judging them,
right.
Are they going to let you walk in and look in your bathroom or look in your fridge to see what you're eating? Probably not. But if they build a relationship with one of my care managers who's more of a friendly visitor and isn't making judgments but making suggestions and just curious.
Right.
And asking curious questions like, oh, can I get you something to drink? And you look and you see and say, oh, I noticed you don't have me. Is there something else you need?
Right.
It's very different than someone coming in and saying, I'm going to look in your fridge. You need to get rid of all this expired stuff. And it's a different feeling. So we have a very unique approach to that. And visiting the house, we can see things that others don't always
We are trained social workers, so hopefully taking a slightly different approach than some of the family members might.
Right. Or, you take it with a grain of salt that the client, they want everyone to believe everything's okay. So they say, yes, of course I'm showering. Of course I'm cleaning. And then, I go and I look in the shower and I realize there's dust in there and they haven't used it for some time. And I see that the washer they claim they're using is broken. And there's pieces of the puzzle that you start to put together when you really kind of know what lens to look when you're visiting the house. So, so our goal is to try to build that relationship and get in more often. But there are clients, I have had clients who have no funds. They're on Medicaid, but they have a loved one who is their go-to person. And if they travel overseas, they'll just call once a year when they go away on vacation, and we refresh all the stuff that we need to know and are there waiting in the wings. Most times for, one client in that scenario, there's nothing. Other times something minor happens that turns into a big deal that we have to handle. So it gives really the overall thing we're doing is giving peace of mind to the loved ones and people who care, to say there's peace of mind, there's somebody who can respond and knows your loved one. And the peace of mind is probably the biggest piece that we bring to the table, knowing who to go to.
Yeah, I'll say. I know, yeah. So, I can see that. Some people busy traveling, they're not around. Because we're all, most of us are pretty busy.
Yes.
So it's kind of hard. Even though you want to spend time on this, there's only so much you can allocate.
Yes.
And do it well.
Right. And another piece of that, speaking of, that peace of mind, is that what I see with caregivers over and over, because we're all so busy as adult children, and, well, one of my friends said, she says, Annette, it's not the sandwich generation. She said, it's a darn panini press. She said, no one told me it was hot and just like so much pressure dealing with your kids and the work and the parents, that what I see is they come in stressed themselves and they want to help their parent, but because they've only got this little time to visit and there's things that have to be done, they're focused on the task. And if I'm focused every time I see you on, okay, we got to get to the doctor, we got to make this phone call, we got to, it changes my relationship with you in a way that is not so fun anymore.
Right.
I'm not relating to you and really spending quality time with you and doing the things we enjoy. And that's really a piece that we try to bring back to the table is you can go back to being just the son or daughter
Right.
and not having to be the care manager yourself.
Well, I could see that being very valuable because that is stressful when you physically have to do all the work. Because it can be a 24/7 job depending on the level that's happening.
Yes.
What level you're at. Because as you get older, you need more attention typically.
Yes.
Or even if you're not physically doing something, you're thinking about it.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
So you're like, oh, we got to do these things next week. I got to do this. I mean, so you're having to track all this stuff.
Yes.
So it's another load that you have to manage. So I guess doing it in partnership with somebody who's kind of managing that for you, I can see how that could definitely make it easier to go in and just visit.
Yes.
Right? Be with them, do things with them that they like to do. It's probably better for them too, I would assume, right? Because they're coming in now with the idea of, hey, let's do stuff together. Let's have a conversation or let's share or whatever, right?
Yes.
I mean, I would think that probably
much
helps
better. Yes.
the individual as well.
The individual's quality of life has improved tremendously if you have changed that dynamic back to one where they're able to focus on what they enjoyed.
Right.
And sometimes they've been so involved in the caregiving for so long, it's part of our role tool of helping show them, say, well, what was it that you loved doing together before? Right. And sometimes the family thinks they can't do it because of some debility or change in their loved one, and we try to find ways to say, well, you can do it maybe in a modified way.
Right.
And that's the magic, as they call it, in home care and in care management, is finding how that they can both live their best life, both the caregiver and the client that we're serving.
Well, Annette, that's fantastic. I really appreciate you coming on today. Anything else you want to
you.
say before we go? But I think you did a great job.
Thank you.
Very important to understand what it is to have a care manager and how that helps the individual as well as the family. You've been listening to Master Your Finances. I'm Kurt Baker. I can be reached through our website, which is www.cwmi.us. You can listen to this podcast and all the podcasts at masteryourfinances.us. And remember that together we can master your finances so you can enjoy financial peace of mind.